Happy Monday, everybody. Happy, beautiful fall Monday. It is so good to be back today. I'm William Richardson back. Did you miss me? I missed you all, even if you didn't miss me. Tyrone, we got some people that probably might say, we didn't, not much of a drop off there, but that's okay. We'll address those folks later. Just joking, everyone. Good to see our esteemed guests. And it's good to be back on the program. Been away for a little bit of a time. But tonight we have something that's always very important to talk about, which is attendance. So much of how we learn and what we learn is based merely in part on us being there and our scholars being able to be there and get what they need. But before we get into that, we want to introduce our guest, Ms. Hedy Chang, Mr. Larry Simmons, and of course we have the face of the franchise, who was rocking out, as I understand it, also with our esteemed producer, Rebecca. But Tyrone Barnwell, so good to see you, brother. And I didn't get to ask our guests. What we do, our esteemed guests, is that we do an open and circle question when we come on the air. So I'm going to ask it now, just to put you all on the spot. But I'm sure that you all will be able to come up with this answer. Your favorite winter warm drink. Your favorite winter warm drink. I will start, and then we'll go to Ms. Chang. Right now, it is a peppermint mocha. It's my favorite winter warm drink. Ms.
I'll
Chang?
go with hot cider.
All right. Mr.
Yeah,
Simmons?
I'm in that same space as Hedy. I love that mulled hot cider. It's kind of spiced a little bit.
Okay.
And mine's is just simply a nice cup of hot tea with probably a shot of some kind of whiskey in it.
I was trying to hold on
Wait.
hot toddy. I was holding on the hot toddy. Thanks, Tyrone.
Wait a minute. A shot of tea with whiskey in it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are certainly back. Thank you all so much for participating. And we look forward, Tyrone, as always, to our family putting in the chat their favorite hot and warm winter drink. As we do any time we have a question for our guests. Of course, family, we know is also for you to participate so we can get to know you a little bit better. And please, tonight is a great opportunity. You have a great opportunity to ask questions and make comments, as you always do. Such great questions to keep this show going, as you always do. And so we're going to get right into this. Ms. Chang, I'm going to ask you first to introduce yourself, and then please, if you'd answer the question, why is attendance so important?
All right. So my name is Hedy Chang. I'm the executive director and the founder of Attendance Works. We work throughout the country. I actually live in San Francisco, that I'm calling in from New York City, and we have senior fellows like Larry in Baltimore, and also Sue Fothergill, who many folks know. Attendance is important because if we believe instruction and the opportunity to be with other kids, the opportunity to be at school so you can be part of a community matters, then not being there also matters. We also know that when kids are chronically absent, that's just missing 10% or more of school, 2 days a month, whether that's excused, unexcused, or suspensions, that it is connected to worse educational outcomes, because chronic absence is both a leading indicator of challenges. If you're starting to miss school, could mean that you're connected to, that you have challenges of housing, of transportation, of health, of other things that not only keep you from being in school, but it means that when you're in school, you may not be able to concentrate and be there and present in the classroom. At the same time, so it's a leading indicator of those challenges. Every time you miss class, it means you may not be able to follow what's going on, so you can stay caught up and stay engaged.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chang. Mr. Simmons, is there anything to add to what Ms. Chang said?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything Ms. Chang, Hedy has said, Ms. Chang has said, but I also feel like it's this thing of connectedness as well, right? It's this thing of the space of making sure that young people and their families are connected to the services, the opportunity, and beyond that, connected to other young people and to other families and to other community members. That's so important in the growth of a young person and their family.
Mr. Simmons, if I could follow up, is it fair to say that attendance now may be more important than ever, if you will, on the backs of a pandemic that took our scholars out of daily community, if you will, took our families even out of a sense of community? Is that a fair statement to say?
I believe so, but I also would say that in that, we who are systems have to also allow a little grace to our families and to our students, right? Because of the pandemic, right? And so that we don't roll right back into this punitive space of not attending or being absent, but understanding that we all have gone through some craziness over the last 2 years. The craziness looks a little bit different for each one of us because of the spaces that we all come from. And so this grace has to be allowed, but at the same time, we still have to support those young people and their families, right? To get to school and then to get the services. As a community school coordinator, I'm sure you understand, right? To get to school and to get the other services and supports that those families and those students need.
Thank you. This is a little bit off the cuff, but you all are provoking some thought. Ms. Chang, why do you think school systems inherently move to a punitive measure when scholars are absent from school? What is, I mean, systemically, that's the way attendance is accounted for. Why do you think that is, and what kind of changes could garner different outcomes?
Yeah, and I think it's like for the last 100 years, our approach is if kids don't, this country tends to we don't see systems problems. We tend to individualize situations and blame individuals. We do that all the time with so many things. When you see lots of kids who are missing school, it's not an individual kid, it's a system. And taking on the system is harder than just think. And so we've seen this history, and we have the wrong mindset. A kid doesn't show up and the teacher may think, oh, they're not respecting me, they don't care about school, as opposed to, I got a bunch of kids not showing up, and either maybe there's a barrier in the community, the transportation, the lack of access to healthcare, or maybe what I'm actually teaching isn't all that engaging, and I have to look harder at my classroom and say, maybe they're not coming because there's something I'm not doing. That's harder than just saying, oh, Larry didn't come, that's because Larry doesn't care. The other requires problem solving. And the problem is, it's usually the other. Maybe at this point a kid is disengaged and not showing up, but it's not about you. But it might have been because when they first started showing up to school, it wasn't engaging and they never got the support to be engaged in the first place. It's usually there's something we could have, should have, ought to have done differently. Now, the older a kid is, the harder you're going to have to work to undo whatever pushed the kid out, undo, some of the challenges of multiple years of missing school because of poor health. But the solution really depends on us shifting our mode. What we do know is chronic absence is connected to trauma. The more traumatized kids are, the higher the levels of chronic absence are. The key to when kids have experienced trauma is not saying what's wrong with you, but what happened to you and how can I help? And that shift is something that is so essential. It's a mind shift. And it does start with giving everyone a little grace. When someone doesn't show up, you don't immediately go to, well, they're disrespectful to me, they're not being, appropriate, but saying, hey, how can I understand that child, that family's reality? And what does that mean about what we could do differently to connect and engage?
Thank you so much, Ms. Chang. Tyrone, is there anything from our family and folks so far? If not, I'll follow up with Mr. Simmons.
So just as always, again, welcome everyone. Thank you all. We got a lot of thank yous to Ms. Chang and Mr. Simmons for being here. So you all definitely continue to share the live, comment your questions. We've been getting questions in the past about attendance and what's been going on specifically after during the pandemic and what's happening with attendance. So definitely comment your questions for our guests and keep on going where we are at. So with punitive punishment, what's the best way? I guess Ms. Chang or Mrs. Simmons, either one of you can answer it. When a parent feels as though the punitive punishment is not warranted for attendance and the kid's been absent, what's the best steps or what should parents do in order to get these issues resolved? Whoever wants to answer.
So I'll let Hedy answer and then kind of follow up, because I just had I had an experience when I was a community school coordinator with truancy court, and it was the worst experience I've ever had in my life and it was because I kind of came on the back end, right? So that someone else had did this or did not do the work that they should have done with the family. And I was put in the position of having to go to truancy court when there was some work that we should have done prior to. And so I feel like, just to kind of add a little bit to what Hedy kind of was talking about, and then I guess I'm kind of answering this, it's this space of us becoming a little uncomfortable to make change, right? So in the space with the parent, I guess that there's some conversations that the parent can have directly with school administration to kind of figure out some better ways of alleviating that issue and not going to truancy court. But if they've already made it to truancy court or already scheduled to go, that's tricky. That's tricky. So I'm gonna pass it to my colleague.
So and it's so hard because it's hard making change as a parent. I also want to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when I've had my own kids, when there've been trouble and I've been having to go in and try and fight for them, it can feel tough because often schools don't mean to be negative towards you. But what I would start with is talk about what are our goals. And I would go in saying to their teacher, whoever it is, look, this is what I want for my son. I want my son to read. I want my son to be writing. I want my son to be successful. And I want to partner with you, school, to get my kid there. Now, the things that you are proposing are not helping us get towards that goal of reading, writing, graduating from high school, whatever, however old your kid is, you can adjust the goal. And let's talk about what will. One of the problems with unexcused, and I want to say this about truancy, is we actually have really problematic definitions of what's an excused and unexcused absence. Right. And they are biased against people who don't have resources, right? So an unexcused absence is if you were ill, but you got a doctor's note. If you're ill for a few days and you don't have a doctor's note, sometimes it won't excuse that. But what if you don't have access to healthcare? Yeah. And maybe one of the reasons your kid is out longer is because you don't have access to the, antibiotics that will help get rid of his earache.
Yeah.
Sometimes transportation or caring for other siblings. those are considered unexcused absences. And one of the problems is that when kids have unexcused absences, sometimes the schools will say, well, the kid can't turn, they're not allowed to turn in their homework because their absence was one excuse. So then they're going to penalize the unexcused absence with something that further pushes kids out.
Yeah.
But what that's not helping is get my child towards the goal that I want. I want an educated child. I want my kid to read, write, to graduate from high school. But I would start there because, to be honest, the school wants that too.
Mm-hmm.
The teacher wants your child to read. The teacher wants, and that's better for the school if your kid's going to be doing better. And so you start with that as a common ground and say, so what's our plan for getting there? And this thing you're trying to do with my kid, not allow them to turn their homework, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then try to negotiate from the place of common ground, which is around our kids being academically successful.
Like that's where I kind of was when I kind of talked about the truancy court. Like when I got put into that space, no one had done that early work, right? And so when I sat there in court and listened to what was happening, was like, well, if I would have met these folks 4 or 5 months ago, we would have been able to get to X, Y, and Z. And I had to explain that to my principal, like, there's a lot of work that we need to do in our teams, right? And addressing and connecting to these young people who are sometimes maybe chronic, maybe almost, what it was called, ARCA back in the day when they were almost chronic, right? So there's this work that we as school staff, as community folks, that we have to do when we notice that, Tavon, Sean, whoever has already missed 10 days, right? So what have we done? Have we contacted the family? Have we talked to mom or dad to kind of figure out what do we need to support? Did we stop past the house, right? As a community school coordinator, that's what I did, right? And many folks aren't like that, but there's a lot of folks that are like that, are taking those extra steps before that push out of class and before that push out of school and before that weekend in jail for some parents, right? We have to begin to understand that, just like Hedy said, that there are things and there are issues that are happening way before you get to this truancy place, right? That we have to become a little uncomfortable and step outside of our classrooms, step outside of our main offices, and really get into it and figure out what's really happening with this young person and how can we support him and his family.
The other thing, I totally appreciate that, Larry, and it is about a whole school and school staff and principal leadership changing the way they think about this. But if I were also a parent, I think if I saw that happen to my kid, the first thing I would do is find the staff person who I think is most receptive to me. Maybe it's my kid's teacher from last year. Maybe it's my, and get them enlisted as an ally in helping me talk to the other staff. So if you talk to the teacher and she's not receptive or he's not receptive, I would then start to find other allies who can help, because sometimes just a single parent, it's hard to get your voice heard. And then if that doesn't work, then you find a bunch of other parents and you say, hey, I think we got a problem we got to organize around.
That was my neck. That was gonna be my neck. Find those parents, because they're there. They're there. There are parents there in your space who are having the same situation or dealing with the same thing that you're dealing with, and sometimes may not feel connected and maybe walking around the building looking for you, And then I would say, and if things don't work out, you might want to tap into your school family council. You might want to reach out to PCAB, but there are folks and organizations who will support you in advocating for yourself and your family.
All right. Thank you all both so much for that. Brother Tyrone, I want to thank the audience for some fine questions there. Was there anything else, Tyrone?
No, not currently. And I'm going to let you go to your next question. Larry then struck the little fuse at me talking about a PCAB and school family councils. But
I kind of threw that little plug in. I saw you laugh because I kind of threw that little plug in. I'm the chair of PCAB. So That's why I said that. Like we're here, we're here, So
So is this okay? So for those of us who are familiar with PCAP, I don't want to, switch the
yeah,
dynamics of the show and the attendance. But since you are here and you are the new chair, for those of us who are familiar with PCAP and have reached out to PCAP and have not gotten, responses over the years, is there a difference? Is there some type of different
yes,
structure that's set in place now? So I'll give you a moment to say that, just because PCAP has always been a resource that was thrown out there to parents, right, over
yeah.
the past few years, right? And what we've always heard is that we're on staff. We don't have a paid staff, so it's hard for us to do this. You know what I mean? Like everything
I
is
hear you.
volunteer. These
So,
are
so again, the Parent Community Advisory Board of Baltimore City Public Schools, we have every year, right? The leadership kind of changes, but the membership sometimes kind of stays the same. We have cast just threw out a big net over the last couple of months to really build our membership through our committees, because that's how parents can really get involved in that work, through the committee work. But again, our email address, pcab@bcps.k12.md.us. We have a staffed administrative assistant who is on it, but then our executive committee is on it as well. We've heard those stories, and some of us even had them have our own stories of years past, and we're cleaning up. But we want parents to know that we are here to be advocates and support for parents and students as well.
Thank you.
And I'll put my personal email in the chat as well if folks want to contact me that way too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tyrone. Very, very important question that has come up here as a topic of this show and all the work that you've done as an organizer, Tyrone. So thank you for that question. And Mr. Simmons, thank you for being forthcoming. Ms. Chang, you mentioned a couple of things that are on my list here in terms of equity gaps. One of the main things you said was class. Can we talk about some of the primary reasons that kids miss school? I know you touched on them a little bit, but if you could prioritize them for us, where do they usually fall when you're talking about why kids are missing from school?
Yeah, we tend to talk about attendance barriers in 4 big buckets. So the first bucket are those barriers that are health, lack of school safety, lack of housing. So that's one barrier. Another one is that it's aversion. School actually is such a negative experience, it's pushing kids out. So screwed up disciplinary policies would be an example of that. Another is lack of engagement. What's being taught? The kids aren't seeing the relevance, feeling not connected. They don't have peers and folks that they don't feel a caring adult. And then the last one I would say is there are also a lot of misconceptions. Families with young kids not realizing just 2 days a month, actually can throw my kid off track. Or high school kids, we've also had that where they're like, oh, I can miss a bunch of chemistry and I'm going to be fine. And you're not going to be fine, because this stuff goes fast, but they, teenagers sometimes are teenagers. And so you actually have to understand which of those barriers are gone. And sometimes it's, there are multiple ones happening at the same time. So right now, I would just say another way of thinking about this is that we talk about the fact that kids come to school when they have positive conditions for learning. When you know that school is a place where you feel physically and emotionally healthy and safe, where you feel a sense of belonging, connection, support, when you feel academically engaged and connected, when you have adults and peers that support getting to school, you'll show up to school more often. I will say this was years ago with the Casey Foundation. We actually did research with Baltimore data, and we found that the kids who were in the schools that were, even if their neighborhood was a challenged neighborhood, but they went to a school that showed that it had higher scores, and I think they were more likely to show up to school, because school is a place that was a way for them to succeed, and even though it was tougher for them. The worst is when you're in a bad school, a school that's not doing very well, and you're in a neighborhood that's not very safe and has a lot of violence. But the more you have, so you really want to think about, how do you put those positive conditions for learning? And when you have large numbers of kids, then it's a systemic issue about putting in those positive conditions for learning. This fall has been crazy, because with COVID, with kids quarantined, with families not feeling like school is either physically or sometimes emotionally safe place, that's been really challenging. But then you need to invest in that healthy school environment, that safe school climate, invest in the ability of both the kids and the adults to support that safety.
Thank you, Ms. Chang. And Mr. Simmons, moving from those buckets that Ms. Chang was speaking about to best practices for getting and keeping scholars in schools, how do you advise? Where do you go? How do you take those issues and work them through for successful attendance for scholars?
I mean, I think that we have to understand the fact that every school has its own culture, right? And that what works at one school is not going to work at the next school, and that we have to sometimes take those steps to really understand the people that are coming in our doors, right? And really looking at the culture of the young people and the families, and understand that, the strategies need to be indicative of the community that it's serving, right? So you have to, to be real honest with you, it doesn't take, like, you might want to start talking to young people and say, hey, what are the incentives that you would like to see? Like, what are the things that you would like to see that's going to keep you coming back? Especially in the high school space, because, once you get to high school, parents kind of drift off and kids are making their decisions to get to school. But and in the elementary space, that's moms and dads and grandmoms and whoever else, caregivers that are bringing those 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. So then those are the opportunities where we can, again, step outside the office and begin to have some conversations with these families, right? With the parents, to kind of figure out, again, what are the things that we need to do to make sure you and your children will be successful, and not coming up with stuff without their help, without their voice, right? You can't do none of this stuff without the voice and the support of your consumer, right? And those are our students, and those are our families. We have to begin to stop making decisions that don't include the people that are being affected by those decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. So it sounds like you're saying there is no formula. You have to listen to the young people and the parents in terms of getting them, what is it going to take for them to respond to get into school?
Yeah, it goes back to, and it's so funny, because I've never thought this, but never was, I don't know, I'm not gonna say brave, but just never said it. But Hedy said it earlier about, maybe it's just what you're teaching and how you're teaching that's not keeping the attention, or doesn't make the kid to come to school. Like, sometimes as adults, we get so caught up in our egos, right? And but like we've been talking about, we're blaming the victims. But sometimes we need to, again, step back and look at the system that we are all working in, right? And trying to survive in, and understand the fact that what's happening is really just, it was designed to happen this way. But we have to kind of, how do we work through it? And we can't work through it by ourselves. We have to work through it together, right? And that means us who are in this space of privilege, like all of us that are on this that are on this call, helping our folks who are not in the same spaces or sit in the same rooms that we sit in, to understand the process.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Ms. Chang, I was curious, you mentioned the quarantine. Can you give us some of the concerns about the effect of quarantine on learning, not just attendance, but learning in and of itself?
Yeah, and so it's been so hard the beginning of the year. And I want to say it's been hard for everyone, teachers, principals, all the folks at schools are, and health providers, they've been trying. It's just been a crazy beginning of the year. So, but the reality is that we've never had this many absences happening in this country in the beginning of the school year. If you have a kid who misses their quarantine, and they're quarantined 10 to 14 days, let's say, and sometimes you quarantine, you know you've been exposed, maybe don't have access to a PCR test, or some families, they're just feeling that they're nervous by this, so they just rather play it safe and they're going to keep their kid out. But the problem is learning builds on each other. When you miss that much school all in a row in the beginning of school, and you come back into school, you may not like math or science, or especially, but even history, you learn out that you miss these concepts. And now when you're back in the classroom, you don't almost know where to start. And we don't have great systems for helping kids catch up. Our curriculum almost assumes the kids were there and then they'll be there, and they don't assume kids gone for that long. And the problem with the beginning of the school absences is beginning of school is not only where you get the foundational concepts, but it's also where you build the relationships, where you get to know the other kids, right? So one of the strategies when you miss school is you call your other friend and say, hey, what happened in that class? Help me out. What if you didn't get to know the other kids in the class? Or the other thing is kids developing relationships to teachers. So they feel like they know who that teacher is and they can trust them and talk to them. I'm worried for all kids. I have to say on this one, I'm especially worried about middle and high school kids, because middle and high school classes tend to go a little faster and you don't have as much time with one teacher. So teachers don't know kids as well. And I think kids get overwhelmed. And once you start to fail key courses, your core, your English, your science, your social studies, unless you start having a longer term, a pathway to come back, you're on the road to dropout. Couple failed core courses, it's harder. And what I think we're going to have to do is we have to help kids feel hope again and realize it's okay. You might have to have the summer plus 5-year plan to get out of high school, but that becomes really essential. And right now there's so much pressure, especially in some of our higher poverty communities, kids taking jobs with Amazon, with other, a job that might pay $16 now, that seems like a great income, but when you're 30, that's not such a great income. You're not going to raise your family on that. And how do we help kids have that longer term plan? And that means having support with kids. That means having kids helping each other, but kids with adults who can help them think about what's my longer term plan for getting to that future.
Thank you, Ms. Chang. Tyrone?
Yes, sir. So, my kid has had a sub since school started, and I often don't know why I send her to school. She is not learning. This makes me wonder if you've seen not showing up to school used as a form of organized protest rather than just the individual disinterest. So that's one part, and I will definitely say to add on to that and to show the difference, that's actually from an elementary school parent. And then I can tell you from a high school parent that I'm dealing with the same thing with my older child now. It's part of, and it's not just me, it's also her, where she feels like it's a waste of her time because going to school now, she's not learning. Of course, we can no longer opt into the virtual learning process, schooling, but going to school and it's just a total disinterest. And for me and her, it's like almost like I'd rather you not go to school and go and get in trouble, because that's normally what happens when you're not interested, you're not learning, you have a substitute teacher, teachers aren't really teaching you, you're watching movies, it causes you to talk and get into, things with other kids. So it's almost, yeah, it's almost a mechanism for some people to stay out of trouble and go. But I want you to focus on the parent. I just had to show a difference between elementary parent. That's an elementary parent who's having an issue with the subs, kids not learning, and then the question about organized protests rather than individual disinterest.
Whether it's organized or not, absenteeism is going to be a form of protest, I would say that's true, and sometimes it's because you have subs, sometimes it's because so part of it is we've got to help schools look at their information differently, not starting by blaming the kids, but looking for patterns. If one way is so this is even pre-COVID. I remember working with the school and we got them to look at their chronic absence data by grade and by classroom. It is revealing. And you'll see the same grade and one group of kids, they're showing up fine, another group of kids in another classroom weren't. And I remember in this other classroom, one of the issues where there was a kid in it who was acting out a lot. The teacher didn't have a way to manage the situation. I don't think the school was fully helping them. And the other kids would claim they were sick. This was an elementary school classroom, I don't even think they communicated to organize it. They all just said they were sick. If you see high levels of chronic absence in a classroom, it's about helping the administrator say, we got to take a deeper look at the situation here. If you've had long-term subs and the kids are not showing up, that principal has to be able to take a look at the situation. If you're in a long-term sub situation, I would start finding out who are the other parents in that classroom. This is where going to schools as a single parent, I know my kids are older now, but I've had my share of challenges too, where something didn't work, the teacher wouldn't work. And when I tried to do it on my own, I got nowhere. You got to find a group of parents to go with you together and say, look, this is a problem. This is a pattern. And I would actually wonder with your daughter, I think it's never too late for our kids never too early for our kids to learn how to be organizers in constructive ways. Could you help your daughter take a look at the situation and instead of, and then maybe this is with guidance, where and how do you bring up these issues to your administration? And maybe in this case, for your daughter, Tyrone, she needs you with her because the kids, they'll sometimes just, it's hard. This is an art, not a science, about how do you raise up some of the systemic problems that aren't allowing our schools to be healthy places of education for our kids. I'm sure either Tyrone, you or Larry have ideas about how this can be done in Baltimore.
Ms. Chang, I'm sorry, Tyrone, if I could just jump in here, because one of the things you said, Ms. Chang, it rings true, but here's my concern. In your experience, how likely are administrators, school systems, districts truly willing to look at themselves, their policies, their initiatives surrounding attendance to make these changes? You can, and I'm sure that you're holding up a mirror to them to say, hey, this is what's happening. Let's look at something different. But I just have the feeling, that some of these institutions are just closing their eyes and they're saying, I don't see anything. How do we get around that behemoth of, it's like you said, Mr. Simmons, both of you all said it's systems, it's institutions. How likely have you seen in your experience that these institutions are willing to make changes?
So what I would say is, I think it is hard. And what I would go is to find the leaders and the staff who will. You got to start with the coalition of the willing. So I have seen, like in one school district that I'm working in, usually I work district-wide, but in this case, the district system is driving me nuts. So what we were able to do was find a couple of principals who I think are leaders. And this one particular principal who really, really gets this stuff, and then use that principle to demonstrate, to show that it can be different, and then to be a model for others. institutions are made up of people. You start with the people who will be your allies, and you work up.
Yeah.
And if you're in a school, you start with the teachers or the staff or the AP, if the principal isn't that person. And you try to find a group of people who will look at it and who might show and demonstrate in this one class, when you do it different, you get a different outcome.
Yeah. So I totally hear you, William, like totally hear you, especially during my time of being like in schools and directly working with families and also working with an administration and trying to get them to understand. And but fortunate enough, after a while, I had a administrator who was like, I'm ready, like we need to make this change. And at the same time, very honestly, there were dollars tied to it as well, right? And so people make shifts when money is involved in it. And so that was that one piece on a very grassroots kind of in the school kind of level. But also, like right now, I'm working with about 19 principals in a school district who had an assistant superintendent who was like, yo, like, let's do something a little different in how we address attendance. And we're going to work with attendance work and some of their folks. And so far, it's been amazing. Like folks are super, super open to some of the strategies that we're sharing. But at the same time, you still have those folks that are like, you know, because what it is it's a personal shift that folks have to make, right? You can't keep blaming people. You have to begin to look at what your involvement and what my school's involvement is in the success of this young person. How do we want all of these young people to get out of this school and to be successful adults? Some of us are in this space that we just come to work. And then there's some of us who are in the space who are about, you know, really trying to make some change. It's difficult, but like Hedy has said, like you really got to kind of find those allies and those folks that are in the space. And it might be the lady in the cafeteria, the librarian, and the guidance counselor that you started off with. But as that team grows, you know, people start seeing like there's some folks that are really paying attention. There's some folks that are really shifting and who are really valuing our children in a way that maybe I haven't valued them in a while, right? And then, you know, those folks will start looking and begin to maybe join, but it has to be a small crew that kind of begins to shift the narrative in the school space. On the district level, I'm excited to be working with the 19 principals that I'm working with. And I know that that's a start. And I know that, you know, other districts will probably see this and hopefully want to do some of this work too, and begin to looking at attendance in a non-punitive way, like we've looked at it for all of our lives on this call right now.
Thank you both for indulging me. I know we have, and Tyron, I'm gonna kick it right back to our parents. I know we have parents who are, pulling their hair out because they've tried to do things as much as they could within their power. They've organized, they've talked to other parents, they've gone to the principal, they've gone to admin, they've gone in Baltimore. In Baltimore's case, they've gone to North Avenue. They've attended the meetings. There's everything that they could have done, they have done, and sometimes it falls on deaf ears. So thank you all both for shedding some light on that. Tyrone, I'll go back to you.
There we go. Parent says it's so tricky. It seems like when we stop blaming kids and families, we start blaming teachers. But when we dig into teachers' struggles, we know the situation is almost always more systemic. So, that was a comment. Definitely agree with that. Also, and just kind of want to throw out there like a question for advice. I mean, I definitely agree with you, Ms. Chang, on teachers, their lessons may not be being so interesting and all of that kind of stuff like that. But it's ultimately, do we as parents really look at the teacher, or do we as that being a problem with the teacher or the system because of the way that teachers are not allowed to actually do what they want with their curriculum, right? Like they're forced to teach curriculums in a certain way. But they're limited to what we've heard from so many teachers since like we've been doing this show and it works where teachers like, I want to do this. I would love to include project-based learning and do some of the things that, you know, my students want me to do. However, I am limited to the books. Like there are things that, excuse me, I am, you know, that I cannot do because I'm required to do certain things that align, you know, with this type of work. So whom do we then, because we definitely had this thing here. We've done a lot of research and we don't want to just like, you know, parents, we need teachers to work. We need to work hand in hand with each other, right? So we definitely don't want to look at teachers as a blame and not holding them accountable where they need to be. But when it comes down to some of those issues, like, you know, what do we do? What's the best things for us to do when we already know that, okay, teachers may play some bit of a role in this, but there's something higher up as to why, you know, they really can't get anything done, and still do it in a way where, you know what I mean? Like we're, you know, calling attention to it, but not blaming them and causing more of a headache for us in these
Yeah.
situations.
And Tyrone, my deepest apologies if I'm conveying that we should blame teachers. I do not mean that. I think blame does not help any of us anywhere in this. I think the situation is, I was saying we can use data on attendance because it comes every day to notice where a challenge is located, okay? How you resolve that challenge, I think you have to assume good intent on everyone's part, and people get tired and people get exhausted and there's all sorts of challenges. And what I think we have to unpack is what's causing the situation and do it in a way where we're working together to understand. One of the things that, and we really like teach right now, this is the hardest time for teachers I've ever seen. Teachers are exhausted. It is, and some of them, you know, they have their own families and their own kids are raising, and they have a crazy situation in schools, which is unlike anything any of us have seen. I think one of the things that I actually think we need to shift a little bit, not only blaming, but creating more time for hearing each other and building relationship, and engaging and connecting. And what we may have to give up is some of those notions that we were going to accelerate and complete that unfinished learning. I think right now we got to create a space so that we connect to each other. We create communities of caring, and that's both caring between teachers, caring, it's got to be reciprocal between teachers and their kids, and creating more of that space and between parents and teachers. So I think that, I guess the question is, when you see that you're having high levels of chronic absence, how do we get everyone's perspective at the table? One of the things we've been trying to get folks to do is like do these empathy interviews. So in this one middle school that I was working in, the principal was really worried about the 8th graders. And so she had her staff contact, you know, do these conversations, meet with all the 8th graders and meet with them a couple times to find out what was going on with them. And really what was happening is they were so overwhelmed by how far they were behind with quarantine that they couldn't even figure out where to start. Which piece of homework do I make up? Which class? And so then what she was able to work out is help these kids. You know, these are 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. When they're over that whelmed, they don't have a plan. She's like, okay, no, you can do this. You do, you know, 2 pieces of homework, get assignment each week, each night. You could catch up on that. And let me talk with all your teachers and let's come up with the priority assignments. Together, we'll figure out a way. And some of these kids didn't even realize that that their grade, this was first quarter, that they, you know, if they had an F, they didn't have to end with an F by the end of the semester. You still have enough time to fix your grade. And what they needed was time to sit down with the kids and have some understanding of the situation and have some understanding of the teachers, and then work together on solutions. I just think we haven't, with all the craziness that's going on, sometimes we need to slow it down a little to understand where our solutions might be.
I want to make sure I'm I just want to make sure that I'm clear too, that that was just a thought that someone had, that the people, we never thought, we never got.
Oh, but I
blame from
worry
you
about it,
on the
Tyra. You're
teachers.
making, I'm
Right.
so worried people will think we're blaming teachers when we say teachers have to look at their curriculum because maybe it's not engaging. Because I do think sometimes people hear that and they hear themselves being blamed rather than saying, no, what we gotta be is real about what's not working and what's our part in changing that.
And then ultimately, like folks like Tyrone and William said, like then folks at a higher level have to begin to listen too, right? Because teachers, just like Tyrone said, teachers are teaching with one arm tied behind their back. Like people aren't just going into any of these fields that any of us are in, right? None of us are in this work because we want to be millionaires. No, this is hard work. We're in this work because we care about young people. We care about our communities. We care, right? And so the same as teachers, and they sitting on the debt. They took the 4 or 5 years of school, 6 years of school, so they're in it, right? But again, you are challenged with trying to teach with one arm tied behind your back, and then all of the things that come with children and families and teaching, right? And then also, I think sometimes, and I'll just thought just kind of popped into my head, but we often forget that parents went to school too, right? And so they are dealing with past traumas from school when they were in school, or trying to navigate a space that they never really was able to navigate when they were actually in the building themselves. And so again, it's that slow down, that grace, that all of us working together to understand and create solutions that are going to be beneficial to not just the system, right, but to the families and our students.
Another, am I still on it? Okay. Another, I agree with this. So great points to you both. Thank you from the audience, from the family that's watching. Another comment I totally agree with is that, and sometimes that means that the district needs to give teachers autonomy, or parents need to need to back teachers to take the autonomy even when it's not granted. I absolutely agree with that. A couple of others definitely like that comment if you agree with it. And that's a point where I'm looking forward to and ready to organize and get parents to that space where they're ready to support teachers and back up, because those, I'm not taking anything away from admin or anyone else. Everybody needs to be in place for what they do. It's fine. However, teachers and parents have first, they have the most time spent with students. They know more of what students need and what they want. They have closer relationships with the students. Most admin, they make it tell you a student's name or something like that, but to really dig in and be able to tell you about the kid, or they really, it doesn't happen. That's either the parent or the teacher. And so, definitely they should be the ones that should be. That's another show. If y'all would like to come back for that one when we discuss that, y'all can certainly let us know, and we can get that get that going. So I just wanted to throw that. I know that we are at time. So as we go, I want to thank the both of you, Ms. Chang and Mr. Simmons, for being here. Thank you both for what you do. To lead this work nationally, be doing what you're doing. Ms. Chang is amazing. And Mr. Simmons, you will be hearing a lot from me. So yeah.
Please. I'm very thankful for being invited. Thank you.
You'll be back. Don't worry, you'll be back. You'll almost be a regular.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This is the time, though, when I feel like it's our relationships, our alliances, our ability to work, connect, and creatively think out of the box that will help us get to a different place and engage our young people. They have brilliant ideas. They have so much to offer on our solutions. And if we can create that space so we can work on it together, not blaming, working on it together is where I think we can find hope for a different situation. But we gotta run the marathon, man. This is a marathon.
Yeah. I really appreciate the work that you all are doing as well, in the city, and just keeping us on our toes. Thanks a lot.